alongside him, Colin Bond in the 9 Camaro, then Peter Brock, Gary Wilmington in a Falcon, alongside him Robert Muir, Brian Callaghan also in a Falcon, Graham Moore in the Copper Art Camaro, Kerry Finnegan making his appearance in a Commodore. Gossie's Jaguar, he arrived late at the track, but he's there, boxing on. Murray Carter's Falcon, Clive Vincent Brown in the Commodore.
And no racing, getting away for the first heat now, and Dick Johnson very smart off the line too, and he heads Alan Grice coming up to the top of Venture Pay for the first time, and just look at the gap he's put over them. Colin Bond in the 9 Camaro moving up smartly into second place. Here they come over the top of the Marlborough Rise and down into Dunlop Loop, and the order is Johnson clear of Colin Bond, and an electric start there from Peter Brock brings him up to about 4th place.
I see John Goss was stuck a bit wide on the top of the hill there, but has he got in yet? No, not quite, and they're not prepared to let him in. Goss is having a rough time of it. His first appearance on the track for quite some time in the big Jag.
Some dust there, but Gary Wilmington coming up very smartly through the field. Brian Callaghan doing a good job there at number 47, just ahead of Muir. Then the number 2 Camaro, the Barbecues Galore car with Graham Moore. Through the bottom loop, that's how close you can see them on opposite lock coming out of that corner, just a tit sideways. The entire field goes through, and there's Dick Johnson of Queensland leading the first lap. Second place held by Colin Bond in the Camaro. Alan Grice is in 3rd place.
And Grice a bit anxious to get past Bond too, if he can do it.
Dick Johnson has always performed well here at Amaroo Park, with the exception of the last meeting, the opening round of the Amscar series. Had incredible bad luck, blew an engine in the biggest possible way. He vowed to come back and win, and he looks pretty good out there in front at the moment, leading from Colin Bond. And Gracey driving the Recar Commodore up into 3rd place.
Johnson started on the front row of the grid alongside Alan Grice, got the better of the start. Grice has been relegated to 3rd. Colin Bond in the big 9 Camaro started brilliantly, is in 2nd place, but Johnson's drawing, and now Grice endeavouring to take Bond as they go down into the bottom corner. This is going to be close. Bond's got the line, yes, certainly, and holds it as he's entitled to do.
Uses up all of the racetrack.
Grice again having a go at him, and he's got him this time. Grice with the inside track. Plants the foot to the floor and sets out in pursuit of Dick Johnson, but by gee, hasn't Johnson opened up a break while that dice was going on there?
We have Peter Brock zeroing in just behind that batch of cars, running back in 4th place. There's Alan Grice coming through, presently running in 2nd, just behind him Colin Bond in the 9 Camaro. Then Peter Brock, he's caught up to the tail of Bond and probably wants to do what Grice has been working away for a lap and a half to do. And just behind Peter Brock, Gary Wilmington doing a great job there in the yellow Ford number 8.
Stands out that car. He ran a great race here in the wet last meeting, Gary Wilmington, and I think this car with a bit more development could really start to put some pressure on the leaders.
There's Brian Callaghan, 47, going through. Bob Muir, Robert Muir in the Army Reserve entry, and then the Camaro, of course, that was to have been raced by Alan Jones. Well, at this stage of the race, keeping in mind this is only a sprint, a 10-lapper, really to get the tyres warm for the later 25-lapper where all the money's on. But even at this early stage, Dick Johnson is running away with this one. There he goes up to the top of the Marlborough Hill, goes over the top, and probably about 50 metres clear at this stage of 2nd place, Alan Grice. Using all of that corner too. And
yeah. Taking plenty of room. Looking forward to. Freewheeling in front. There's Gricey trying hard. Colin Bond, Amaro, as you said, Mike, probably holding up the Marlborough dealer team Commodore just a little. But Brock was free to admit after qualifying yesterday it was just not going quite as well as it was last meeting.
There's Alan Grice coming down through Winfield Corner, very tidy through that turn. Brock a little close at that time to Colin Bond, and Bond was very much sideways coming out of that corner. Here's Brock back behind them, a little off the pace at the moment, but I think Peter would be the first one to admit he's only interested in the big money race, the 25-lapper, the 2nd round of the Amscar series, a little later this afternoon here at Amaroo Park.
Over the top, Gary Wilmington clinging to Peter Brock as well. He's not going to let these leaders get out of his sights, and he knows that if he hangs on to Brock's tail, he might be in a position to get up amongst the placings, approaching the halfway mark in this 10-lap race.
There's Wilmington, the yellow Ford, doing quite nicely. Brock moving. The track is very, very dry. Just perhaps later in the race we'll get a shot of it. Anyone that moves off the track will be in diabolical problems with the rubble, and just exactly how dry it is there we'll show you later. Okay, sweeping down into the right-hander at Winfield, the 9 Sports Camaro. A little bit of opposite lock on there. Peter Brock tagging him, and back to Gary Wilmington. There's Colin Bond doing a good job racing the Amscar series for Kevin Bartlett. They'll be teaming up, of course, later in the year. We'll have information for you regarding that a little later in today's telecast. Once again, we picked them up coming down into Dunlop Loop. Brock very, very close this time to Colin Bond. And Wilmington's been able to stay on their tail, so perhaps it is Bond that's holding up the fray at the moment.
Well, that's the battle for third, and meantime, back at the head of the field, it's still Dick Johnson, but Alan Grice is taking some ground off him, so he's got about 4 laps left to do something in. Going into the corner, here's Grice. Johnson, you'll see him, there he is, comes into view, and there's only about half a dozen car lengths difference between them.
He's pulled back the gap dramatically. Some problem that time for Colin Bond as they came out of that corner. We'll pick that up later for you. There's the gap between the race leader Dick Johnson of Brisbane and Sydney's Alan Grice driving the Alan Brown Recar Commodore.
And over the top of this hill, you'll see as the other cars come through that both Peter Brock and Gary Wilmington have taken Colin Bond. Bond now relegated to 5th position in the race. Johnson, Grice, swinging down the back of the course. Johnson really is going fast.
They were very, very quick here yesterday. In fact, the first few cars are well and truly under the record, still held by Bob Morris at 54 seconds even. But in practice yesterday, Alan Grice and the Alan Brown Recar machine with a 53.5 seconds. So just look at him starting now to put the pressure on. Here's Dick Johnson. And Grice, hot to trot, starting to move onto the tail of Dick Johnson's car as the laps run out. Up to Bitcher Pave over the top of the Marlborough Crest and down into Dunlop Loop. A little sideways that time, Johnson. Grice pretty close to him. We'll wait for the third. There's the gap back to Peter Brock. So he, in fact, is gaining, and so too is Wilmington, and they've already left Colin Bond.
Grice is in striking distance now.
Very, very close.
Johnson getting a little bit untidy there. Just put a wheel off the track and under pressure.
I think we're coming up for an interesting final couple of circuits of Amaroo Park for our race leaders. There's the gap back to Peter Brock, then to Gary Wilmington, then to Colin Bond. We wait for them to go past.
As they do, 2 laps to go.
They come on to the front straight here at Amaroo Park, past the pits. Dick Johnson almost looked like he was yawning. And Alan Grice starting to work away now at setting up a passing manoeuvre. It won't be easy because there's not too much time left to run in this race. They both flowed to the outside and used the full extremity of that corner. And now we find Alan Grice in the Recar Commodore right on the tail of Dick Johnson in car number 17, the True Blue Falcon.
1.5 laps remaining. Can Grice pull something out here? Well, he's certainly picked up a lot of ground on Dick Johnson in the last 4 or 5 laps, and he's really putting pressure on. There are not too many places on this track that you can make those passing manoeuvres. One of them is coming up into Winfield Corner. Grice brakes late. Johnson going well. The last lap board is out.
1 lap remaining, and just look how close Alan Grice is getting set for a pull up the hill as they come up to the top of the hill. Over the top, here they come. And Dick Johnson has Alan Grice very, very close to him indeed as they come through that corner. Now work away down the back part of the course for the final time. Johnson trying to put a checker on the front of the 17 Falcon, and Grice, of course, this is his home track. He does very well here. Takes a good man to beat Grice round, and he really, I would think, is enjoying being back at in the spotlight of motor racing.
Well, he proved here last meeting 5th in the wet, and today, with starting off pole position, just a little outgunned by Johnson at the start, and he had a lot of ground to make up. He's made it. He won't have the opportunity to get past Johnson. I don't think unless he can make a last desperate manoeuvre on this corner.
It's going to be close, though. Here they come out of the last corner. Checkered flag at the ready, and Dick Johnson of Queensland will win the pipe opener.